Good morning Pacific, good evening Pacific. Here is Schrader again for the next tool in the OPPO sequence.
But this time he's not alone, I'm also here. I'm Melike, Hemmami. Good morning, good evening Pacific.
And this time we discuss with you a very interesting tool which is called Capital Pentagon, and it's about farmers' resources. So what do we discuss? Very much in detail we go for the 5 capitals. Why it's important? Because it determines what farmers can do in terms of farming and livelihood improvement. We explain the tool because you can do it. It's this time an easy to use tool, quickly done. And then how to do it, we'll explain it in 3 steps. So you're getting familiar now with our OPPO wheel. We go from the practical case until action planning. So now we are zooming in on farmers again. After the profiling of farmers, we have the Capital Pentagon as a tool.
But there is a central question we would like to ask first, before getting into the details of the tool. We would like to discuss shortly, together with Ted, what do farmers do to ensure a livelihood for their families?
First I need a hot pepper, then I can think better. But what farmers need, of course, they need so many things. They need working tools.
They need water.
They need cash.
They need to be able to think and reflect on what they are going to do.
Farmers are family farms, so they need relatives and friends.
They need pastures if they have livestock. What else do they need?
They need so many things. I'm looking here. They need fishing gear and boats if they are fishermen.
They need land to farm.
And you don't want to have cash all the time. You need a bank account maybe.
You need seeds to be able to start to sow for the next season.
And if you've harvested, you need a store to put your produce.
And maybe you need to know what kind of crops are suitable for the area you are planting your produce.
Some farmers, if you have a bigger plot, maybe you have a tractor, or to go to the plots you need a motorcycle or a bicycle.
You need to know how to farm.
Very important. And also you need to know how to save for the next season.
What else? Health. You need to be healthy.
Of course. And maybe you have to make informal groups, or you have to associate yourself in more formal groups. And then also I talked about harvesting. You need bags and crates to put your produce. And saving is not only in cash, it can also be in gold and pearls and jewelry. And in terms of relations, it's not only with family and friends. Maybe you need to have good relations with traders, with companies who buy your produce, relations with the local government. So there are so many things
that farmers will need to be able to make the ends meet.
So we quickly managed so many things that farmers need for their activities, for their livelihoods. And actually we structured already in 5 groups. Here we have natural resources. Water, pastures we mentioned, livestock. Here we have financial resources. Here we have social relationships, social capital. Here we have tractor, working tools, fishing gear. It's the physical capital of farmers. And here the knowledge, the good health, the knowledge about crops, it's all human capital, what is in the minds of people. So you see some dots here on the flip chart, and actually what you're going to do is making a pentagon. We have the middle here, so you can draw the lines like this to all the different capitals. And then connect the outer lines like this. And this is what we call a beautiful pentagon. So we asked the basic question, what are the resources farmers need? And then we did the exercise on the flip chart. And then also you see it on the screen. So we have 5 capitals. Really important to remember them: human, natural, physical, financial and social capital.
Actually, the Capital Pentagon is part of a bigger picture, a bigger approach actually. It's the sustainable livelihood approach. It's an approach that tries to look at different factors to try to understand what farmers do to earn their living, why they adopt the strategies they implement based on what. For that, the sustainable livelihood approach, they check first what is the vulnerability context that the farmers are operating it. What are are there any shocks? Are there any trends? Are there things that are changing because of the seasons? The second one is what we also focus, is the Capital Pentagon, where they try to understand what are the assets that the farmers have, how do they use it, is there something that can be done to improve certain of the assets, and then that's not the only thing that the sustainable livelihood approach looks, but to be very brief, they check all the existing structures. How do things operate? What are the loads? What are the regulations? What are the processes in terms of how does the culture have an impact on how they farm, on how they make steps to try to earn money. And based on all of these components, they try to understand what are the livelihood strategies that comes out from their way of using their assets, from the context they are in, and from the structures and processes that are implemented in their country or their regions. And that's how we could summarize the sustainable livelihood approach. Actually, the approach is about understanding why people behave as they do, and to put the actors and the perspectives they are in context. Would you like to add something, Ted?
No, I think it's clear. It's really getting into the shoes of farmers, seeing their resources.
But when it comes to our course on farmers as partners in agribusiness, we take the question a bit differently, and we only focus on the Capital Pentagon. The reason for this is we would like to try to assess what are the resources the farmers we are working with have, and how it can have an impact on their entrepreneurial behavior. So this is the main reason why we use the tool Capital Pentagon.
Then the first capital is the human capital. It's, if you click again, you will see it's everything that's in the heads of people, but also in the body of people in terms of health, ability to work, good health, knowledge and skills, ability to reflect and innovate. And of course this capital is individual, everybody learns individually, and you can't give knowledge from one person to another, but you can try to do so by exchanging knowledge and skills.
And of course you need to understand what are the existing skills in a specific context and the farmers that you are working with, so that you can see whether you can develop some steps or interventions to develop certain skills that they might not have but need. The second one is the natural capital. Here we also gave the examples. Do they have water? Is it rain-fed agriculture, so then the weather becomes an important natural asset? Do they have pastures if they are doing livestock? Do they have land to farm? Is it reduced? How is it going with the land tenure? What are the rules? Are there limitations? It's an important production factor. It can be converted into financial capital. For instance, if you have trees, you can sell some of them to get capital to be able to buy another asset that might be missing in your context.
The third one is physical capital. If you would look on the internet, sometimes it's also called manufactured capital. Of course it's made of natural resources, but it's all things like infrastructure, tools and equipment, inputs, machinery that farmers need to farm. Again, that's also a very important production factor. Physical capital, you generally find it on or around the farm, and it's can be made available to collective arrangements, and that's where farmers' organizations come into play.
And it's important to know what they have, because these are things that you can intervene with. Are there any tools, very simple tools, that can be brought so that you can increase the productivity with a simple step? But to be able to see that and assess that, you need to go and check what's the situation on the ground.
Then financial capital, I think that's quite clear. It's not only cash, of course cash is important, but also savings, but also what you save in informal groups, what you have on your bank accounts, and even in other forms of assets like jewelry we mentioned, that you can easily convert in others. So financial capital is the most fluid one. It's the easiest to change in other. You can buy land, you can buy physical resources, etc. And that's what we call asset conversion.
One time that can be critical, well, useful to check is the times when the school starts, the school registration starts. Because if you go in a village and then try to understand how people deal with the registration fees, then you can have some ideas on how they use their financial, or they find their financial capital in times of distress.
And last but not least, the social capital. Land you can touch, physical things you can touch, cash money you can touch, social capital you can't. So it's in the relationships and the networks of people, and it's very, very important. Relationships can be formal and informal, but of course the most known relations are family relations, neighbors and friends, also the relations with companies, with traders, with maybe financial institutions, local governments. It's all part of what we call social capital. The one we stress a lot is also the formal farmer groups. Farmers can work together in farmers associations, cooperatives, and those kind of things. So important to remember is that social capital is in the relations that the farmer has, and it's embedded in the formal and informal groups he is part of, he or she is part of.
And understanding how the farmers are connected with each other in different groups can also help to understand better the human capital, because how much are they connected? Do they have access to knowledge, or do they have access to knowledgeable people? All of that can give you a much broader picture also for the other assets that we've been talking about.
So all people make use of networks, because we sometimes say human beings are social animals. And here you see how farmers can be connected, and for agribusiness development, for value chain development, this social capital is of crucial importance.
And it's a very big characteristics of entrepreneurs to be very well connected and have a very strong social environment.
And because it's so important, we want to introduce 3 types of social capital. The first one is the most known. It's the horizontal relations, for instance, between farmers within a farmer group, and that's what we call bonding. Later on, and there's a whole school of knowledge about social capital, it's also the connections between different groups of people, for instance farmers and companies. There are different social groups, that's what we call bridging. The symbol we can use is this one. But also for policy change and those kind of things, it's important that farmers link up to higher levels. So there we put it like this symbol. So we have 3 types of social capital: the bonding, the bridging, and the linking.
The aim of the tool, as you could understand, is to understand better the context where the farmers are operating, so that we can see whether there are interventions that can be done in terms of balancing the availability of assets if it is needed. The tool is to encourage you to reflect according the 5 capitals on the resources that farmers have and how to improve these. Resources are at the basis of farmer entrepreneurship and defines to what extent the farmers can take risks. Because if you don't have the assets, and if you don't have some guarantees, and if you don't know you have it, you won't be willing to take risks. When to use it? You can use it anytime that you need to understand the situation of farmers. So it can be in a process of situation analysis before developing a program, a proposal, or a rural development intervention that you are aiming to develop. Assessing the resources that farmers have and reflecting on how to improve the situation is especially relevant for action research, program design, monitoring and evaluation. For whom and why, this really depends on the objective of your action research, program design and monitoring and evaluation purposes. But what is important is that it's a tool for you to understand better the context where you are trying to have an intervention for farmers to earn more, but then for more inclusive agribusiness development too. And we suggest 3 steps to do that. The first one being, as like we just did, but we just did it generally, but you do it in your own context that you are working in, to reflect on what do the farmers have, what assets do they have, how do they use it in your own context. And try to be as specific as you can in your description, because that will help you to tailor the best intervention where need be. We have a format for this that you already received. What is the current situation? But one details that we would like to give here is that, let's say it's human capital, don't just write knowledge of farming. What type of knowledge do they know? How far do they extend? Is there anything that can, because you are talking to farmers, of course they know how to farm. But do you know what they do for productivity? Do you know how they deal with pests, for instance, or whatever?
Mechanization
And everything. Try to be
management.
Really specific, because the aim of this tool is to really understand what is needed. So we know a farmer can farm, but what do we need to know so that the farmer can improve his or her skills to farm better, for instance? Or for the natural capital, yes, they have land, of course they have land, they farm. But then what's the extent of the land? Do they have very small 1 hectare, 1 acre land, or they have big lands, or so that you know whether they need to come together to be able to meet the demands, for instance. But you really need to try to be more specific and not leave it as like, yeah, they have water. But what are the water resources? Is it really abundant, or is it something they have to take care of carefully because they might run off from it? The second one is about assessing. So once you are very specific on how, on what the assets are, try to see if it's absent. Try to be as realistic as possible on how you score them. This is an exercise to try to understand the real situation. So this is not an exercise to try to show that you have the assets. For instance, we have a lot of examples on the natural capital that people might tend to see that they have it a lot, but because of the assessment not done thoroughly, you might end up with the wrong interventions. So what we suggest is to have a scoring, and you will see later on. Ted can show you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have, for instance, the natural resources are really, really meager, then you say it's very weak. So this is from 0 to 100. So if you say it's really weak, you give, for instance, a score of 20. So you put a dot here. Then maybe for financial capital, it's a bit more. You give the score of maybe 45. For social capital, say, oh, really, there's a lot of community relations and farmers are well organized. Physical capital, it's quite limited. Human capital, well, farmers know quite a few things, but they need to know so many things more. So you give relative scores according to this explanation.
And how do you know whether you scored it realistically? It's very simple actually, because if we go back to the previous slide, if you are very specific here, the story here will already make that scoring realistic, because then you will be able to understand when you see something weak, it was the natural capital, then you should be able to see something here that says they have land, but it's very scarce, and then tenure is a big problem in a specific region. Then we can understand why the scoring was weak. So these two help to see each other, how realistic they are.
So once you have made the dots, you can connect the dots by drawing the lines between the dots. I think we've done it all at school at some point. So this is your Capital Pentagon based on the scoring that you gave. So this is the assets that farmers have. You can also show it on the screen. Put the dots and connect the lines. So you see the same happening over there. And actually what's important to mention, this is the basis of what farmers have, and from there they can improve their situation. So everything that is white here at the outside is room for improvement.
Yes, and you have to realize also sometimes there might be some assets that you cannot do much. Then you have to think about what are the other combination I can intervene so that I can improve the situation, the intervention that can be developed in a certain context. Which brings us to the last step,
which is strategizing. And also already in the introduction to the OPPO approach, we said OPPO is not about doing research, no, it's about action research. And action research, we do it for improving the situation. So after the identification of the assets, the resources, or the capitals, there are three words that are used all the time, of the farmers in your situation, you have your Pentagon, but then the next step is how can, for instance, the physical capital is here, what can be done to strengthen it? What can be done to strengthen the human capital? So here, a similar format, but here you write down the options to strengthen the farmers' resources, because the resources are the basis for farmer entrepreneurship and activities.
And of course you need to check whether it's really needed. Like maybe your first priority is not going to be to try to intervene in the physical capital, but in the social capital.
Yeah.
So these are really factors that you need to take into consideration to see all your capitals and to see what are your own resources to be able to make these steps, and then decide which one should be the first ones to intervene with so that you can have a more robust capital pentagon.
And we explained it in a handout that you have received. So the three steps that we quickly presented here in this video are explained in more detail. So please take your time, read the tool, and then we kindly invite you to apply it.
And please ask us questions through the website, through the platform that CTA developed for you, so that we can already discuss all about it and know your questions about the tool. Thank you for your attention.
And we wish you a lot of success applying this tool. Thank you very much.